Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you a conversation I had with Dr. Qwynn Galloway Salazar. She was a guest 2 years ago on the podcast, and she's coming back today to talk about her new course, Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life. The course is being hosted by Psych Armor Institute on their website, and you'll learn all about the course, how Qwynn came to create it, and then the other two parts of the course that are coming out near the end of this year. And we have a fantastic discussion. I know you're going to love this one, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel and be sure and subscribe and leave a rating and review wherever you happen to listen to the podcast. In addition, if you're so inclined or able to make a small contribution for just a couple dollars a month, you can become a supporter on my Patreon page at patreon.com/EOLU. You can also go to EOLUniversity.com/support. There you'll find a couple of other ways you can make a one-time donation to help keep this podcast on the air. So we'll move on with my interview with Qwynn Galloway Salazar now. Today, I'm so happy to welcome back my special guest, Dr. Qwynn Galloway Salazar. And we first spoke about 2 years ago, and we're going to tell you everything that's happened during 2 years since our very first conversation. But I'll read Qwynn's bio. She is the founder of In Their Honor. She's an Army veteran, an end-of-life doula, and educator. For over 20 years, she has dedicated herself to elevating the quality of life and overall well-being of military and veteran communities. Through her engagement in areas such as trauma, behavioral health, and suicide prevention, she has cultivated a profound insight into the enduring effects that military experiences can have on veterans and their loved ones. Her instrumental collaboration with the renowned Psych Armor Institute has led to the highly anticipated Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life series, set to release in the fall of 2023 and has now released course one of that series has now released. And I had the honor of getting to work with Qwynn as an advisor on that project. This initiative will be a significant milestone in supporting veterans and their loved ones. Qwynn is proud to be at the forefront of this incredible project. So you can learn about the course Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life at psycharmor.org, and I will leave a link in the show notes, and then learn more about Qwynn and her work at intheirhonor.info. So Qwynn, welcome back, and I'm so happy to have you join me again and to be able to celebrate this course that you've been a part of creating.
Oh my gosh, Karen, thank you so much for having me back. It's 2 years. It feels like that was yesterday. And I think I'm beaming from ear to ear because just that first interview with you really set the trajectory to where I am now. So before we even get started, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your guidance. And thank you for interviewing me.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. I've been so excited to do this follow-up. It still blows my mind that it was only 2 years ago you reached out to me to let me know that you were I think a fairly new end-of-life doula, and that what you really wanted to do was teach veterans and their loved ones how to do end-of-life care for veterans. That was your goal. Now we're 2 years later, and you've created this amazing, and I have to say, it's an incredible course. It's so beautiful. I can't even say enough good things about it. And it's going to do so much to change end-of-life care in the veteran community. And I'm so proud for any little small contribution I had in all of that taking place. But honestly, it was your energy and your passion that brought all this forth.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Well, what a journey it's been. And Yeah, you were saying you listened back to our interview from 2 years ago, which I encourage listeners to do now. If you didn't hear it, it was episode 324, I think, in the podcast. So, yeah, about around 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And um, it's just phenomenal what's taken place in those 2 years. But I did want to go back and retrace with you a bit of information for anyone who didn't listen to our previous interview. I want to understand why this subject is so important and why we all do need to educate ourselves about care for veterans at the end of life, because it's unique and it's different than some of our other patients. And those of us who might feel, oh, I'm so seasoned, I know everything about caring for people at the end of life, we don't know about the needs of veterans if we haven't been taught. And that's what makes your course so valuable. So tell us about that, why this is so important.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, at the height of the pandemic, I had the opportunity, gosh, it feels like just yesterday, but I was finishing up my dissertation and I was working with women veterans that transitioned from the military, but several of them had traumatic experiences during their service. And at the time, I was wondering, how did those traumatic experiences potentially resurface throughout life's continuum? And how did they surface at the end of life? And I wanted to know, as a nation, what were we doing about it? Not just our hospice and palliative care organizations, but what were we doing in a neighborly way to show up and have some supportive, compassionate role in end of life care for veterans, their caregivers, and their loved ones. And at the time, one of my mentors, by the name of Dr. Kate Hendricks Thomas, she was living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And Kate and I would have many conversations. And one of the conversations we had was, you know, one of the things that she shared was, Qwynn, please move this needle forward, right? In this end of life work, please move the needle forward, because as a society, we don't know enough and we're not as prepared as we think we are. And with that challenge, she challenged me to do that about a month before she passed away. And I did everything in my power, uh, Karen, to honor that and honor that work as a way to continue her legacy. So when I think about, people sometimes say to me, well, what makes a veteran any different than anyone else that may be dying? And that's a really great question, but I often like to share, some of our nation's veterans have experienced various degrees of trauma. They've been experiencing combat trauma. They've went to combat. They have had military experiences that have, for some, shaped who they are for the course of their lives. And some of them have stories so deeply embedded in them that not even their family knows. So what happens at the end of life resurfaces. And sometimes our families are hearing some of these stories for the very first time and are not prepared to have questions or answers or resolutions to them. So I really found it important to say, as a nation, how do we show up, right? How are we able to reduce some of the regrets, the unfinished business, the shame, the guilt, the need for forgiveness that some of our veterans carry with them through the end of their lives? So I started in their honor. And what I thought was going to be just a small project in my community, honestly, like in 2 years, in the middle of a pandemic, it just catapulted. Because here's the thing, we were having conversations on caregiving to survivorship, how one is a caregiver and now all of a sudden one is a survivor. But that conversation about death and dying wasn't happening to the degree that I thought it should have been happening. And so I just kind of felt that pull. And once again, Kate's challenge to do something about it. And so here I am.
Wow. That's such a powerful story. I love that you mentioned Kate's challenge to you because it's actually a good reminder for all of us that part of our legacy at the end of our lives will be, who do we inspire who's coming after us? Who do we inspire who's just beginning to do their work? How do we leave them with wisdom and challenges that they might need, to move forward and go on and do something incredible after we're gone? And that's such a great way to look at it, that you've carried on her legacy. And wow, have you ever made her proud with what you've done?
So I truly hope so. It's been an amazing ride. It's been an amazing journey. Just the other day, I received a note from a survivor. Um, Last year, I spoke at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's convening, and I spoke about death and dying in my work as a doula. And you never know who's in the audience and how you're going to impact someone in the audience. Um, and during when the course was released last week, I had a survivor send me a note that said, I was in the audience during that convening, and you speaking about death and dying, I never knew how it was going to impact me 2 months later when my husband was dying from ALS.
Wow.
And it's stories like those that really encourage me to continue to do the work that I'm doing and to move that needle forward, because there are caregivers that don't know what to do. Oftentimes we're given the option of hospice a little too late, and we're trying to figure out all the things that we need to do while grieving, while starting that anticipatory grief and trying to just navigate our world and our space. And so I think, with these courses, it's allowing people to start taking a glimpse into end of life, because it's an experience we all will face, um, before it's too late.
And that's so very valuable. And it is so important for people who work in the end of life space, whether you're a hospice worker or a death doula, or even someone who does pre-planning for funerals, to know that veterans may not necessarily talk about what's hidden inside of them. As you said, they may not tell us about the trauma they feel, they may not tell us the stories that they're holding, but it's so important that we understand that that is there inside, so that we can create a safe spaces for them to be able to come forward and talk, because they're likely holding things they've carried their entire lives, and they will not come forward with that easily unless we can help them feel safe, and we need to know how to do that.
Mhm. One of the things that end of life professionals and those that watch the course will hear me share is the importance of putting your clipboard down, right?
Mm.
And that's in any arena, however, whatever role you play, right? If you're a healthcare provider, in order for you to build that trusting relationship and that rapport, don't start off with the administrative work. Sit for a minute, put the clipboard down, meet that veteran where they are, right? Let them know that you genuinely care about who they are, right? It does a world of good. Put the clipboard down for a moment. And I learned that lesson through a chaplain. So I cannot say that those words were mine and I made it up, but a hospice chaplain shared that with me a few months ago about how important it is to show up, hold space. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be an expert in military culture and military competency. But when you show up with a sense of humility and let that veteran and their caregiver or loved one be the guide, that's where the true magic happens. That's where the true breakthroughs, closures, forgiveness truly can happen.
Mm. That's just such a beautiful reminder. And we should maybe, I mean, it's amazing to me because, as you said, 2 years ago when we talked, I think your intention was to maybe create a workshop or a small course. And since you've teamed up with Psych Armor, like this course, wow, you wrote the course like this. The course itself was your creation, the script for it and the writing of it. But Psych Armor did this incredible job of filming it. And it's so powerful and impactful. You cannot watch these videos that they made without being totally moved. It's so incredible. So that was quite an amazing partnership. How did that even happen?
That partnership really stemmed off of another challenge, or dare rather, I say. So I remember shortly after you and I did the first podcast, Dr. Tina Atherall, who is the CEO for Psych Armor, she's one of my mentors. We were on a call together, and I will never forget this moment either. I was walking in the park and I was ranting and raving to Tina about end of life care and what are we doing in DC, because she spends so much time in DC. What are we doing to ensure that we're not only looking at certain components of the veteran's life, like post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide prevention, moral injury, employment transitions? How are we ensuring that we're looking at the whole continuum? And I was going on and on and on, and she was silent. And she said, Qwynn, we're not doing enough in end of life care. And I said, well, why? And she's like, because it's not being done. And she said, so I'm going to ask you, my friend, what are you going to do? And I remember having some egotistical response, like, well, why me? Why do I have to do all this work? And her response was simple, and it was because you were chosen to do it. Now do it. And so we started it slow. We really started the project slow. And then by last October, we received a private donation to fund the project. I
Wow.
don't even know who my funder is, but I am eternally grateful for the family of this Vietnam veteran that said this work needed to come to life. And so here it is. I scripted the entire course, every element from the advisors to the illustrations in the course, every bit is extremely intentional, because I wanted to create this course that anyone, whether it was a child or, a funeral director and everything in between, I wanted everyone to realize they have a role in this space. We often say to our veterans, thank you for your service. Well, what does that mean? Right? And at the end of life, how can we turn those simple words into action? And so with the first course, which is called Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life, Compassionate Communities, it's showing what a compassionate community can look like. How can we show up and be present and care for that veteran, and also care for their loved ones as they're transitioning through the end of life?
And so this first course, would you say it's kind of a basic course for everyone to go through? Everyone, no matter their interests, should do the first course, because that's where you start to understand the foundation of all of it and what it's really about. And that's the course that's available right now for people to sign up for.
Yes, absolutely. It's really just, it's that introductory course for you, right? And what's beautiful is with each course, there's a workbook. So you have this chance to go through these courses, and they're micro courses. So they're not even extremely long. I think the first one in its entirety, maybe 20 minutes. So they're short, they're not long courses at all. But then there's a workbook that's attached to it that's designed to allow that viewer to reflect on their own experiences, what they learned throughout the course, as a way to transfer that knowledge, as a way to transfer that training, so they can take it along with them outside of their computer screens or whatever technology they're using to view the course. So I think it's fabulous that you have this guide that you can write alongside as you're watching, this film, the course, and you can just work in it simultaneously. And it's my hope that even a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout can come in and say, to their next door neighbor who they know is a veteran. Can I sit with you for a little while, right? I believe intergenerational learning is pivotal. And it's such a good way for our young people to understand our past and our present so they can make impacts for our future.
Mm. Yeah, that's just so beautiful. I love the idea that it's this first basic course is for anyone, even children and young people. You don't have to have any special knowledge. Um, but the message comes through so powerfully, and it's such amazing teaching that you've done. And so the course is on Psych Armor's website. Can anyone take it? Can anyone go there and sign up for it and register? And
Absolutely. Anyone can sign up, register. It is free, free again.
oh
And
wow, I didn't even know it was free.
yes,
That's
it's
amazing.
free. And what's really cool is you get a certificate after your completion. You get an actual certificate. So I'm always thinking about, hospice organizations who have to have some type of military cultural training for the year. What a great opportunity to have those courses under your belt, receive a beautiful certificate from those courses, and be able to use what you learned to serve the veterans and their caregivers that you're caring for.
So the first course is the basic course, but tell us about course 2 and 3, which I know they're not completely finished yet. So by the end of the year, they'll be available.
Yes, so course 2 and 3 are in post-production. Course 2 is specifically focused on caregivers and loved ones. And so it is truly 5 things to educate caregivers and loved ones on caring for their veterans to the end of life, right? And then the third course is focused on healthcare providers. And what are those 5 things that veterans want their healthcare providers to know as they're journeying the end of their lives? So I'm not going to go too deep into it because I know that I'm going to give it away, but I just
Yeah.
want to highlight what the topics are and what the target audiences are for course 2 and course 3. And those will also have workbooks that are specific to that content with it. And then there's also a resource guide that's been put together that anyone can download, print it out, have it readily available to know what resources from more so the larger veteran service organizations and the larger national organizations that support end-of-life care and veteran-centric care.
Mm. So it seems to me if you are a healthcare provider or an end of life care provider in any capacity, you should do all 3 courses because it's so important for all of us to understand caregivers and what their needs are and what they're experiencing, because that's at least half of our work is trying to support caregivers. So I think it seems so important that we make sure we're learning about the needs of caregivers too.
Yeah, and as healthcare providers, it's also a great way to give that caregiver a resource to have, right? To say, okay, you may want to check out this course that will give you a little bit of information and educate you about what some of this experience may look like, with the understanding that every end of life experience is completely different, but just an overarching framework of what this journey can look like. And what are some of the things that you may want to look into, right? How does storytelling come into play? How does legacy projects and memory boxes, and how do we really focus on the fact that even though our veteran may have received a terminal illness, they're still living while they're dying? And how do we still show up while they're dying, but ensure that we can hold this space to make memories, um, to forgive when there's a need to forgive, and to be silent when there's a need to be silent. So those are some of the beautiful aspects of course 2 that I'm so proud of. I really worked hard so that these courses wouldn't have more of a clinical. It was more of the heart work versus
Mhm.
head work, because that compassionate care is so needed at the end of life.
And the thing is, like, we get trained in the clinical aspects. That's what the training in hospice really is about. We get that training, and it's the heart work that sometimes goes missing that people forget about, or it doesn't get taught, which is why this is so important to add on to whatever other training is there. It seems to me like hospice volunteers should be watching this training as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And Karen, just to piggyback on, one of the reasons why I asked you to be an advisor is because, yes, you are a physician, but you lead with so much heart, right? And I wanted that to be infused into this work so that other physicians would know it's okay to show up to a space and just feel warm for a moment, right?
Mm. I really appreciate being recognized for that, for the heart, because that's kind of always been how I've been. And it has been a struggle at times within my career and in medical training to be a person with a big heart in a field that doesn't necessarily value the heart very much. So it feels good to me to be recognized and to even have a place where how I see the world and what I have to offer was of use. And I'm so happy to know that.
Absolutely. So many learning lessons, so
Yeah.
many years. But definitely, but going back a little bit about the compassionate communities, and I know, you know, we often meet to talk about compassionate communities, and really, once again, it's this thing of we all have this role to play, and we all can play this role. And you don't have to have. It didn't take me a PhD to realize that I can be compassionate and be with someone that just needed a little bit of extra love. It was a matter of showing up, finding out what their wishes are, finding out what the needs of families are. A family may just simply need respite care a spouse may say, I want to get my roots dyed, right? Like, um, everyone can see my gray. I just want to get out and just be. And it's showing up and being able to say, okay, well, you go out, you go do that. I'll be here. It may look like, a veteran's young child may need to get out to the park. And you're a coach and you know that this family has this young child that can really use the opportunity to go burn off some some energy. You can take them outside, right? It's showing up in a way with whatever gifts, skills, abilities, talents that are innate to you that you bring to that veteran. And it's not just veteran work. In a perfect world, this work will transcend to just humanity, right? This is my version of my second service. And yes, it started with the veteran population because that's my population. But truly, my hope is that this compassionate care, this showing up for one another simply because it's our humanity, is a part of my legacy and what I leave behind.
Mm.
Um, is that people are intentional with caring for one another and seeing each other as a extension to who they
Mm. That's really beautiful. And I feel so strongly that right now, in particular in our society, we really need this emphasis on compassion in our communities because we're polarized in certain ways. A lot of people have sort of pulled in and they're not willing to connect with even their neighbors, and they're keeping to themselves and staying in their own little world and their own little bubble. And there's a lack of compassion in all of it. We're not even aware when someone is suffering or has needs who might live right next door to us, let alone do we show up and offer something to help. And that's what we really need to change that.
we really need to change that. If it means just getting outside and meeting one neighbor, we all press our buttons to go into our garages. We pull into our garages in our car, and then we're turned off from the external world. Ring their bell, right? Get to know who lives right next door to you, veteran or not, just to say, hey, I see you. We can do so much good and connect with people simply by saying, I see you. You may even save a life because you don't know what your next door neighbors are facing. And sometimes just showing up saying, I see you, can offer them the opportunity to say, I'm so and so, and this is what I'm facing. And such a beautiful relationship can grow from that. And, looking at our neighborhoods as our tribes, as an extension to our family, the way it used to happen years ago is so needed now, right? More love is so needed now more than ever. Last year, my neighbor, their dog had passed away. And right before the dog passed away, they asked if my dog could come outside because they were going to put him under the next day. And
Oh,
our dog sat on our deck. And as simple as that may seem, our dogs sat on our deck. Now, these are two dogs, Karen, that would bark and bark. And you would think if they ever got together, it would just be a train wreck. They sat on the decks and they were still.
mm,
The next day, I showed up with a peace lily. And I show up because that's what we're supposed to do, right? That's what we should model and aspire to be, are humans that can show up when one is suffering. And so that's what we do. And to think about how this all translates now in terms of this work with veterans, there's a group back in June, I had the opportunity, no, May, to speak to an association, a veterans association, and they had just recently lost one of their members.
mm,
And he was in the hospital, and his wife went home to get some rest that night, and he passed away in the middle of the night.
mm.
And that association, that group of primarily Vietnam veterans, were so brokenhearted that he died alone, that they wanted to do something about it. So they reached out and said, hey, Qwynn, can you come out? Can you talk to us? Can we strategically figure out what can we do so this never happens again? Not on our watch. So they created this cadre. It started out as 6 Vietnam veterans that called themselves the 11th Hour Squadron.
Mm.
Would take rotations and sit with veterans that were dying. And about a month ago, I had a conversation with their lead, and they're up to 12 volunteers, right? And this is not attached to hospice. This is not attached to palliative care. This is truly a community project where a group of veterans are saying, if our siblings in arms do not want to die alone, we will not let them die alone. And
Mm.
we'll be there to support them and their loved ones for as long as it takes. And that is beautiful. That's what showing up to humanity's needs and suffering. That's what it looks like.
And it's amazing to remember that one or two individuals who get an inspiration can make a difference, can start a movement actually. And so I think sometimes we may set aside those little intuitive hits we get of, oh, I should do something like this because we can't imagine it could really happen. But look at you, look what you've done in 2 years, by taking your inspiration and believing in it and just doing it.
Yeah. And I say to folks all the time, they're like, well, you're the PhD. You're supposed to be focusing on the best practices and evidence-based sciences and research. And I'm like, there are people that are going to do that work. But I'm the PhD that sees the gap and is willing to fill that gap immediately by inspiring the doers to do something, right? And there will be those that are in academia that will run with it and research it, and that is great. I'm the one who sees the gap and wants to fill the gap as fast as possible with people that want to continue to serve, and for civilians that want to serve, right? It's important to note that that's important too. is to have civilians along this journey that can come in and say, no, I may not have served, but I want to be of support, and I want to be able to care, and I want to be able to offer, whether it's emotional or social support, somewhere along this journey to say thank you for your service. And that's huge. That is so big. And it helps to bridge this civilian military veteran divide that has been plaguing our nation for years, right? Like, let's bridge that and say, you can learn about our experiences by showing up just as much as we can learn about you by you deciding to show up, and we meet in the middle.
Mm, that is such a great point, because I was remembering back a few months ago, I interviewed Wes Moldogo and Lauren Grigsby, and we talked about the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch, and both of them had so much praise for a woman there. And now I don't remember her name, but she's a civilian who'd never done any military service, but they said she's amazing and connecting with veterans, and that it doesn't really matter. You don't have to have military experience. You have to have an open heart and that humility that you talked about.
Yeah, that open heart is so big. It's the secret to the recipe, is coming in, no intentions, blank slate, right? Just a clear a whiteboard where you're allowing them to teach you. It doesn't matter, sometimes I think about how long I've been in this work and in this space, but when I show up with a veteran, I just show up, right? Oftentimes, I won't even say that I'm Dr. Galloway Salazar. I'm just Qwynn, and I'm going to journey with you, and I'm going to be here with you, and I'll be here with your family for as long as it takes. And it does so much good when someone knows that there is another human that wants to travel alongside of them at one of their darkest moments in their lives. No intention. You're not a research project, truly heart to heart, holding hands, companioning to the end.
Mm.
And
Mm. Just so beautiful to think of that. And then another a good call for everyone out there who's listening, that these courses that you're creating are for everyone. So you don't have to be a veteran or even understand anything about military service. The course isn't so much to teach people about military service either, but it's really talking more specifically about what a veteran might need that you encounter. Is that correct?
absolutely. And it's what a veteran might need, but it also is designed in a way to inspire you to say, okay, I can do something, right? Like, I can do something too. Um, and I don't need to have, 12 degrees to do it. I can do it too. And that's the phenomenal part, about showing up and just being compassionate and having that open heart. When you lead with that, so many breakthroughs and so much closure can happen.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, like, on how many hospice services right now are there veteran patients who are veterans, but the staff doesn't even know that the person they're working with is a veteran. And I think the course is such a good way to get comfortable with asking the right questions and to bring it up, because this is an important information we need to have about our patients, and we need to know how do we know what to ask, and how do we encourage them to talk to us?
Yes, yes. And I'll give one good question, right? And I'll let everyone watch the course to hear about other questions. Be willing to ask, have you served in the armed forces? I know we are so ingrained to say, are you a veteran? Guess what? Everyone's not going to identify, right? And there are certain minority populations, chances are they may not identify. For example, women veterans may not readily identify and say, I am a veteran. We are only in 75 years of women being integrated into the armed forces. So you have this, World War II, Vietnam generation, this era that are aging, And for some of them are starting to have serious illnesses or terminal illnesses and are dying. And they may not just identify with the term veteran. So it's important that we ask that question: have you served in the armed forces? Every person that comes onto hospice care, every person that comes into your care, ask that question. Because if you look at me outside of what you know, you wouldn't just say she's a veteran. You
No.
wouldn't think it. You wouldn't think it. So it's important to ask that question. And as you're asking the questions and as you're learning more because you decided to put that clipboard down, you're hearing about those lived experiences. Because so often, Karen, when we think about a veteran, we see a white male Vietnam veteran, right? Like that's the image that's kind of emblazoned in our minds. And truth be told, there are just an abundance of minority populations that we are just touching the surface on understanding what their lived experiences are. And so we've got to do a better job in asking that question, and we've got to do a better job in digging a little bit deeper and understanding what their experiences were like, what their experiences are like now, and how can we be culturally sensitive to whatever their needs are.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I remember Wes Moldogo pointed that out as well, that not every veteran is happy about their military service or views it as a positive thing. So we have to be prepared for the answers we may get from people too.
Got to be prepared. You got to be prepared, and it's and not take it personal, right? Because you may interface a veteran who has, you think about Vietnam veterans, they weren't welcomed home. So some of them have taken those experiences and buried them way down deep. And then we get to the end of life and some of that stuff bubbles back out. And you may be the chaplain, or you may be the social worker, or you may be the nurse that's working with that veteran, and they're not the nicest person to work with, right? They're not the nicest person to support. They're not the easiest person to manage their pain. And you have to sit in the space and understand, don't take that personal. Don't take that personal, but also be willing to receive assistance and receive support as you're journeying with them, so that you know what to do to best care for some of those veterans who, I hear the label all the time, they're difficult. Like veterans are so difficult to work with at the end of life. Well, have you asked what their lived experiences were? Did you put your clipboard down, or did you automatically jump to the space of saying, they're just difficult? Or is there a stereotype, right? So check your own biases and check your own preconceptions as to what you think about veterans, and know that every opportunity that you engage with one, it's that one. And you have to learn about their identity and how they show up. Because for some veterans, their military experience didn't play a major factor for them, right? Whereas some, it is woven so tight into their identity and who they are. So all I can say truly is, take your time, and I know it's hard because caseloads are growing immensely, but whatever time that you can, put the clipboard down for a moment, eye to eye, and get to know who you are sitting across as a human, and learn about their lived experiences so that you can create a better plan of treatment to care for them.
Mm. That's such great advice. And I know you mentioned it earlier on in the interview. The phrase, thank you for your service, ends up sounding kind of trite when we say it. And I know when people say it with good intentions and thinking, oh, this would be a great thing to say to someone who's a veteran, but in a way, it doesn't even begin to touch upon what really needs to be discussed.
Yeah, it doesn't. And you're 100% correct. Oftentimes when we say it, we think it's the right thing to say. You walk into a space and you see you see a gentleman or you see a woman that has, I'm a veteran, a ball cap on, or a Vietnam hat on, and we're inclined to say thank you for your service. But I challenge you to just act, right? I was in when I filmed for the series, I flew into San Diego, And I'm getting off of the flight, and there's a gentleman, and he has a Vietnam veteran hat on. And I thought about the experiences of Vietnam veterans as they were coming home, especially in the airports. So he was getting ready to get his bags off of the carousel, and I asked him, "Can I get your bags?" And then I said to him, "Welcome home."
Mm. Wow.
Instead of saying, "Thank you for your service," welcome home. And he gave me this look, and I just bowed out, right? Sometimes when you put an action to your gratitude, it makes that "thank you for your service" less cliche, right? It shows that our society does value our service. It shows that our society does see us and recognize the sacrifices we made to keep our nation free. So, in whatever way that you can, you may be in the grocery store, grab a cart. If you see that veteran, grab a cart from them, help them unload their groceries, whatever you can to just show a bit of compassion. It goes a long way.
Wow. You just brought me to tears with that statement. Welcome home, the thing that they've never been able to hear from our society all these years later. And welcome home is a feeling that they need to have, that they're welcomed back, not just thank you for your service, but welcome home.
Welcome home. So, it's the little things. It's the little things and the intentionality of how we show up to make a difference, that I hope spreads out into ripple effects. And I truly hope that communities start sharing, right, what tidbits of what they're doing. How are they forming coalitions and partnerships and collaborations to address this, right? We address a multitude of topics in coalitions, but I think we can address end of life experiences in coalitions. And if you have an end of life coalition, have a subgroup for veteran related work, right? Bring in the VA, bring in NHPCOs. We honor veterans. Let them have the opportunity to share and educate your community on end of life care, whether it's advanced care planning, wills, directives, legacy work, oral history. We can go on and on, but it's connecting those dots and seeing who's in your community that can do what.
Mm. I love that. That's a great call to action also because, right now where we sit in the end of life movement, there's so many things happening all at once in different sectors and different areas, but it's really vital that we come together and collaborate because that's how we will make things better for everyone.
Absolutely. We cannot, and I will shout it to the rooftops, we cannot do this work alone or in a vacuum. We need to be joint hand in hand in doing the work because we all bring a little something, a little different flavor to the space. When I look at the advisors that made up the Caring for Veterans through the End of Life series, each one of the advisors brought something different to the space, whether they were a doula, a social worker, a bereavement, a chaplain, right? Like you as a physician, like there was a multitude of knowledge and wisdom that came together to co-create. And that's how we're able to move the needle and move the dial. When we say it's not just me with an idea, we all have this collective wisdom that we can share that can shape how we care for veterans presently and in the future, how we can care for humanity presently and in the future. So when we lead with that and we lead with that open heart, paradigms can shift.
Mm. It's so true. And I think if there's a takeaway from your experience over the past 2 years, it's that you've got to follow your heart and follow your passion, whatever it is, and then be open to things. Be open to whatever comes along your way. And it may be completely unexpected and not what you thought would happen, but you've got to be ready to go for it.
You've got to be open. You got to be open. Karen, I don't think, the audience really knows, and those who listen to this, how this, like, I legitly sent a response to you on your contact us page, right? Like, that's how this happens, right? Like, it's not a matter of, we ran in the same crowd. Like, I was brand spanking new to the end of life work, but we connected because I had followed your work and had heard the story of your dad. And there was a part and a pull in me that said, the worst that she can do is not respond. The best that she can do is respond and hear that you're doing this work. But then 2 years later, here we are, right? We've had the chance, with Suzanne O'Brien to dedicate a doula, a veterans edition, and we dedicate it to your dad. We've had the chance to start compassionate communities think tanks. Like, if we are willing to collaborate with others and play in the sandbox of life, gosh, we can make just this death movement explode in a way that level of death denial, those conversations that are not happening, begin to happen, and begin to happen in such an organic way that it doesn't feel forced. It feels like it's just a part of the continuum. It feels like it's just a part of the journey that we have in life. And I think we all are trying to do that work at the end of the day, is to make those conversations just a little bit easier, so that we have what we all know as the good death, so that we all are a little bit more prepared for our own end of lives.
Mm. Wow, that's so beautiful, Qwynn. And I love that you've taken your initial focus on veterans at the end of life, and your vision is so broad now, and seeing how, I mean, in a way, accomplishing this course around care for veterans at the end of life, this is just the beginning, and it can be expanded in the most perfect way to reach out to all of us to help change our entire community. And that's really profound.
Yeah, I don't want to be the one that says, do it this way. Whether you live in an urban area or you're in a rural area, my dream would be, what I envision is communities to just think about this topic really broadly and create strategies that work for where they are, right? And then come back and share. If you have a blueprint, share it and let other communities adopt that and build on that to the point where we're all doing something. That's what I envision for this world. And it's not just veterans here in the US, it's veteran communities all over the world. How can we inspire communities to stand up and stand in that space and be support, and to adopt methods and adopt systems that work for them? But just realizing that broader context, that these conversations need to be had, and there's work that needs to be done.
And another piece that stands out to me is that there are organizations like the Psych Armor Institute that looking at their work, you may not have thought this is a place that's going to have a profound impact on end of life care. And yet, when we start bringing in like these diverse partners who may never have been part of the end of life space before, but once they hear about it, they may recognize, oh, that needs to be part of the work we do. That needs to be involved in what we offer. And that's what collaboration does when we base it on our whole community. And then even the anonymous donor, God bless that person, whoever it was, who came
Absolutely.
forward, like, you just don't know. You just don't know who will step up and have a piece of this creation and share in it. But again, it's the community that it's coming together that makes all the difference.
It is coming together. And when I think about Psych Armor, please check it out. They have now touched the entire continuum of military and veteran communities. And that's huge, from service to end of life. that is phenomenal. So, I will be a cheerleader for as long as I possibly can. Um, that's phenomenal to be able to say we looked at the life continuum for veterans from beginning to the end, and we've covered almost every topic in between. Phenomenal.
Wow.
Phenomenal.
And in a beautiful, beautiful way. I mean, the work they do is really incredible. I'm so impressed.
You and I both. You and I both. So I look forward to, seeing this grow. I look forward to hearing stories of communities doing amazing things. I get the chance to go to Central Oregon in October next month. So I get the chance to go see Lauren at the ranch. And so I look forward to that opportunity and to put my feet in that space and to really see all of the amazing work that's coming out of the ranch and how it's touching lives in Central Oregon. Um, so it's going to end, and of course, getting a chance to hang out with the folks at Peaceful Presence uh,
Yeah.
and a few of their hospice organizations that are in that area. So it's going to be amazing. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. Well, I want to remind everyone listening, the course we're talking about is Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life, and it is offered on Psych Armor Institute on their website, psycharmorinstitute.org, right? And for free. That's amazing. I didn't even realize that it was free. So you can take course 1 in the series right now. It's up and launched and ready to go, and get the workbook when you sign up for it. And then the other 2 courses will be ready by the end of the year, it sounds like. So
Yep, that's correct.
so when you're done with the workbook, the other 2 may be out and available to get started on those. So I highly recommend it. And when we got to preview course 1, I swear there wasn't a dry eye on the entire Zoom call. We were on Zoom, but because it's just so moving and so wonderful.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift. The last note that I'll leave is when we all sat on that launch party towards the end, I shared that my best friend was sitting next to me, and my best friend has been my best friend since we were 4. And we got off. And if you remember, I shared with her that the image of the Vietnam veteran was an illustration. It wasn't the story, but it was an illustration to honor her dad's service. We got off, Karen, and she looked at me and she said, "This helps me to understand my dad better." And then she looked at me and said, "You're going to be there if anything ever happens to my dad." And I said, "Of course I am." 3 days later, her dad passed away.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow.
And so, timing of it, when you think about how the universe moves, and you think about, just the timing of things, she was able to see that course. She was able to see this image of her dad, how his legacy will continue to live on. And she was able to see a bit and understand and be educated as to what some of his experiences were as a Vietnam veteran and why he may have isolated and why he may not have shared some of his stories while he was living. And that's a gift.
Mm.
What a gift.
Yeah, what an incredible gift to give her, and even for her father, for her to have that renewed, that deeper connection with him in a way right before he died.
So that's
Well, Qwynn, oh my gosh, what
love you, Karen.
it's just so amazing. I don't know, we're so connected in some ways. It just like makes my spirit soar when we talk to each other. I just feel like we're in each other's lives forever. So who knows what will come next?
Who knows what will come next, but I can guarantee as long as I have you alongside of me on this journey, it is my hope to make you proud. It is my hope to continue to honor the legacy of your dad and honor all of the veterans, past, present, and future. So thank you once again for having me back to the podcast. It has been awesome. And I look forward to the future.
Oh, same here. It's my pleasure, Qwynn. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I absolutely loved it. Qwynn and I have such a great connection together, and we had a great time talking about care for veterans at the end of life. So, if you like this content and it's helpful to you, why don't you share it with someone else and let them know because they might benefit as well? And until the next time, I'll see you then. Take care and be well.